Hi everyone and welcome to this video. In this video I'm going to show you how to draw a mountain range landscape, and to create this, for the sketching I recommend using either an H or an HB pencil. Then for the shading I started with a 2B and then later on moved to a 6B for some additional darker shading. To blend the shading I used blending sticks, and then I also used a couple of different erasers to add some highlighted sections. And for the paper I used smooth Bristol board. But you don't need these supplies, you can use anything, any pencils and any paper, and I promise you can create something similar. As you can see, I started by lightly sketching some mountain peaks, loosely holding the pencil and creating very rough shapes. And I was looking at a few photo references for inspiration, and I wanted the mountains to kind of zigzag towards the foreground, connected by a series of ridges in between them, so it gives me a good opportunity to layer the shading and the details. And after sketching the rough shapes, I continued to develop the shapes of the mountains closest to the foreground, and don't worry about creating any specific details here. I was looking at photos to understand the way the mountains are shaped and the way they're formed, just for inspiration. And I recommend checking out photos of the Matterhorn. It's such an awesome looking mountain range, and it actually inspired me to work on this project. And I just approached this in a very relaxed way, not trying to create any specific mountain range. I made sure to keep the sketch light, and I really recommend doing this. If you want to change any details later on, it's easy to erase without leaving any marks. Eventually, I decided to sketch a foreground layer, and because I'd drawn quite a high viewpoint, I wanted to make it look like we're looking across from another mountain in this mountain range. With the sketch completed, I began adding the shading, using the 2B pencil, and I was roughly adding light shading to the mountains in the distance, and I was blending the shading with blending sticks. If you don't have blending sticks, you can use your fingers or cotton buds or a brush. Any of these will work. In this drawing, I wanted to leave highlighted areas on the left side of the mountain peaks, as I was imagining the sun shining from that direction. And I also decided to add mid-tone shading to the sky, and I made sure to blend this as well. Don't worry if the blending blurs the outlines of those highlighted sections, because you can use an eraser to sharpen those lines again. After that, I continued using the 2B pencil to add more shading towards the peaks of these distant mountains, and I sharpened some of the outlines and added more contrast between the shaded areas and the highlighted sections. And I wanted the sharpest details to be at the top, and I wanted them to fade downwards. Then, with this background layer completed, I used the eraser to tap away at the shading I'd added to create clouds. Now it was time for the mountains in the foreground, again using the 2B pencil as a base and adding even darker shading on the shaded sides of these mountains in comparison to the ones in the distance, and I used a 6B pencil in some areas towards the peaks. The increased contrast here is really helpful in making these areas of the drawing stand out in front of those distant mountains, and so it helps a lot with the illusion of distance as well. And on the highlighted areas, I didn't want them to be completely flat, so I added light patches of shading with a blending stick, and then used the small eraser to add some details on top. I made sure to blend the details towards the lower areas of the mountains again, keeping the details at the top nice and sharp. The contrast between the shading and highlights and the blurred and sharp lines helps so much with the depth of the drawing too, and where the focus of the drawing is. And I really enjoy using this method because you only need to focus the sharpened details to certain areas, not the whole drawing, which makes it a lot easier, and it's still really effective. Eventually, once I was happy with all the shading I'd added on this layer, I then started adding clouds around these mountains with the eraser. Next up, it was time to add the foreground, adding even darker shading with the 2B and 6B pencils, and developing some small details like rocks and cracks as it's much closer, and making sure to add shadows and highlights. After that, I just needed to refine some areas of the drawing, adding to the details towards the peaks of the mountains and continuing to sharpen those areas. Then I also added a few extra clouds and some birds flying across the scene, and after that this drawing was completed. And I loved working on this. These kinds of drawings are so much fun and they're so relaxing, and that's why I highly recommend giving this a try. I really hope this video helps out in some way, and be sure to let me know what you think of it in the comments below, and also let me know if you have any suggestions for future videos. If you want to see more art videos like this, then feel free to subscribe to my channel, and any thumbs up or shares on this video are hugely appreciated. If you want to follow and support my progress, then be sure to check out the links in the description for my Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and Patreon. And once again, thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for the support. I really appreciate it, and I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you all soon.